don't miss anything.
No. I just about to start. Also, Narayanan, you're going to mute all of the others, right? Coming in, with the exception of Sundaram sir alone. Either video wise, and certainly audio. Everybody has to be muted.
Audio, yeah, audio I will mute. Video on the last
audio
time.
And video muted for everybody except for Sundaram sir.
When they enter, right, that is the automatic setting. So don't worry.
Yeah.
Video.
Video on the it's sometimes it's a whack-a-mole, but yeah, I'll try my best. And I want this appear when they come in, it's automatically turned on. I have to go manually do it, but yeah.
But I think the two of us together can whack many more. So you have me also here, so we'll do.
இல்ல எனக்கு only பெரியவாலாம் என்டர் பண்ணும்போது சில டைம் எனக்கு கஷ்டமா இருக்கு பண்றதுக்கு பாவம் அவளுக்கு வீடியோ இது.
So Revati, I have a question. Why is it that I'm seeing Indian Fine Arts San Diego in the center and all of you in the top? Should not the person who is speaking should be in the center?
For right now we are sharing that content.
You are sharing the content.
Banner. Banner share பண்ணிருக்கேன்.
I want them to see Indian Fine Arts Academy. Then we take it off and we'll stop sharing and we will all be seeing.
Wonderful. Then I will understand. Yeah.
Excellent.
So நீங்க சொல்லுங்க Revati, when you are ready I will
I think we can let them in and then you stop sharing and then you tell me.
We have about 50 plus people waiting. So
we can let them in. It's 31. Let's get started on time.
Okay, I'm going to let them in. Raviji, you're ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Welcome everyone for this evening of musical conversation with Sangeet Samrat Shri Ravikiran ji. A couple of house instructions before we get started with today's musical conversation. Because of technology, I think it's enabled all of us to be able to share things like this, but at the same time, technology sometimes could be interesting. So we request all other participants outside of the speakers themselves to please turn off your video and mute yourself so that everybody can enjoy the program. When it comes to question and answers, we will make sure that you'll get a chance to either relay that through chat or we will enable it at that point. But please turn off your video and audio and let's all enjoy this musical conversation. This is going to be moderated by Dr. C.M. Venkatachalam with an introduction by Srimati Revati Subramaniam. I will now turn it over to Srimati Revati.
Namaste everyone. It's great to be connecting with you all this Labor Day weekend from San Diego, the jewel of the West Coast, known all over the world for its beautiful beaches, the world's best weather, really warm and friendly people, the best skies, even the clouds here are amazing. It's also one of the most vibrant and sought after destinations in America for Indian performing arts. The primary reason for this is Indian Fine Arts Academy San Diego, a fine organization that has been promoting Indian fine arts for about 13 years now. My name is Revati Subramaniam, and I'm one of the managing trustees of Indian Fine Arts Academy San Diego. Since its inception in September 2007 till today, we have staged over 225 concerts of Carnatic and Hindustani vocal and instrumental music, Bollywood music, world music, and various dance forms, including Kathak, Odissi, Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Kathakali, Mohiniyattam, and modern fusion dance, as well as lectures on various topics. We have staged an 8-day annual festival every year for the last 12 consecutive years. Over 1,000 artists from all over the world, including India, USA, Canada, UK, Singapore, South Africa, Dubai, Malaysia, etc., have performed here. Our annual festival is the second largest festival outside of India, only next to the Cleveland Aradhana, and is attended by people from all over North America. In addition, we also stage an annual youth festival, competitively selecting young talent from all over North America. Indian Fine Arts Academy is managed by a board of 19 music lovers, led very effectively by our president and secretary, Dr. Shekhar Vishwanathan. The organization thrives with the help of hundreds of volunteers whose help is greatly appreciated. We decided that we are not going to allow COVID to interfere with our musical immersion this year. In fact, we have made sure that we connect not only with audiences in San Diego, like we do normally, but also with audiences all over the world during this period. We kicked off this conversation series that is expected to continue through the end of the year with a conversation with Shri Navy. All over India in the magic carpet with the one and only Srimati Aruna Sairam and her wonderful soulful music. Today, we have a conversation on the power of Carnatic music as a unifying force with a powerhouse of Carnatic music, Sangeet Samrat, child prodigy, who identified 325 ragas and 175 talas when he was just 2 years old, hailed as the Mozart of Carnatic music, Sri Chitravina Ravikiran. Conversing with him today is Sangeeta Seva Ratna, Dr. C.M. Venkatachalam, who's a well-known and revered figure in San Diego. He's a wonderful guru and rasika of Carnatic music and has been a great admirer of Sri Ravikiran for as long as I have known him. It gives me great pleasure to introduce both of them. We are in for a very special treat. Again, to repeat what Sri Narayananji said earlier, just a quick housekeeping announcement. Please keep your audio and your video muted. And if you have to leave and return, please make sure that your video and audio are muted when you return as well. I now hand it over to Sri Venkatachalam. Please take it away.
Thank you, Revati. It gives me great pleasure to bring to you a legdom by Sangeet Samrat Chitravina Ravikiran. Born in 1967, as Revati mentioned, an exceptional child prodigy, son of, under the care of his father, Acharya Pitamaha Chitravina Narsimhan. It's well known that at the age of 2, the expert committee of Music Academy tested his knowledge in ragas and talas in public. Okay, he answered everyone by recognizing correctly hundreds of ragas and talas. In 1997, when we arranged Ravikiran's concert, was the first concert that we arranged in San Diego. He allowed us during an intermission to interview him. He was questioned about that particular event in Music Academy. His answer was, at the time, I don't remember anything. I hear that happened from the newspaper, is what it said. Luckily, of course, my parents were in the audience during that concert. They stood up and said, no, we attended that particular expert session and vouched for that it happened. He's hailed as the Mozart of Indian music by Belgian TV. Gave a new meaning to the word prodigy, is what someone said. Ravi Shankar declared, if you don't believe in God, look at Ravikiran. What is remarkable is that he has grown up as a major figure in music, a prolific composer, exceptional performer, and a very successful teacher. Vocal concert at the age of 5, Chitravina concerts from age of 12. Collaborated with frontline Carnatic, Hindustani, Western, classical, jazz, rock, and Western world music artists. CNN TV said, brought new audiences to Indian music. Radio Australia, perhaps the greatest slide player in the world today. Teasing precision and dazzling effects, New York Times. He's the youngest to receive the A top grade by All India Radio by his early 20s. As I said, a very prolific composer, over 800 music and dance compositions. His credit in 5 languages, Sanskrit, Tamil, Telugu, Hindi, and Kannada. He made world history by setting to music the entire 1330 Tirukkural verses of ancient Tamil poet Thiruvalluvar in a matter of 16 hours. He has operatic dance productions like Ramayana, Mahabharata, with extremely well-known dance groups, introduced award-winning concept of mel harmony, a theoretically and aesthetically revolutionary way to blend two disparate approaches to music: melody-centric Eastern system with harmony-centric Western system. Youngest to win the President of India's Senior Award for Artistic Excellence. There is an urgent need for unity in the world today, isn't it? It is so appropriate that we invite Sangeet Samrat Chitravina Ravikiran to talk about music as a unifying force. Please, I welcome Sri Ravikiran.
Thank you, Venkatachalam sir, and namaskarams to all the Vidwans, namaskarams to all the dignitaries here and all the Rasikas here. It's such a privilege to be working with the Indian Fine Arts Academy of San Diego in any form, whether as a performer or as a person who is actually giving some lectures or in a panel discussion or in some of my dance operatic creations. It's always a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to, interact with Rasikas and musicians on such important topics as, the need for using the power of music to unite people. As Shri Venkatachalam observed, it's a very, very, very powerful tool. Music is such a divine art in one side. As a social tool, it can be a very powerful unifier, and I strongly have seen legends like Pandit Ravi Shankar or Bharat Ratna, M.S. Subbulakshmi, or so many of the great artists whose music, I can definitely say that this includes artists from all over the world, whether they are Western classical or jazz or rock or pop artists. They've all unified people across frontiers. So I think it's a pleasure to talk about this topic. And, I was also very happy that the Indian Fine Arts acceded to my request that we make this as interactive as possible and let people type their questions in the chat window as we are conversing, so that if there are any questions from people that are pertinent to the topic, we'll definitely also try to address that. So over to you, back to you, Venkatachalam sir. And, I think Revati ji may probably like to welcome some of the artists who are.
Yeah. Yes, just 1 minute. I think it's wonderful to see some amazing artists in the audience here. Shri Neyveli Santana Gopalan is here. Srimati Nirmala Rajashekar is here. Please, Shri Venkatachalam, take it away.
I think Shri M.A. Krishnaswamy is also there. The violinist.
There, yes.
Or Sundaram sir is there, so everybody. Yeah.
V.V. Sundaram is here, yes.
Ravikiran sir, that you learnt music in a very traditional way. None other than your father, Chitravina Narasimhan, and T. Brunda is very, very special paddhati. I must say that you were taken deep into that. Usually when people are very passionate about their own domain, they don't look outside. Very highly religious people may not look at other religions. Music can tend to become religion. Surprisingly, you have retained that traditionalism, and yet you lift your head up and are looking at other things. How do you approach this? Could you describe what are the challenges you saw and how you solved them when you worked with others? This may include either Indian musicians, Carnatic musicians younger to you, or very senior musician like Shammangudi Mama, and then Northern Indian musicians, and then look at interactions with Western music. And maybe also comment on being an instrumentalist primarily, even though your vocal music is very well known. You gave a wonderful OVK vocal concert, I still remember, so beautifully in San Diego. So does the instrumental music enable you to really reach across better than it would have been if it is simply a vocal music?
Well, Venkatachalam sir, you actually pointed out about the religious aspect of it. For me, the one sentence answer to this is that if music itself is a religion, then all other religions become part of music. So when I work with I work with artists of diverse communities, diverse castes or religions or diverse nations, all of us are very, very deeply aware of the power of music that is bigger than all of mankind put together. All of us who have been created, all of us who are going to be created, and all of us who are right now living, we cannot match the power of music. That is the supreme power of music and the supreme power of sound that can actually heal. It has so many other therapeutic properties, as a lot of us knows. It can relax, it can de-stress, it can remove distress, and so much of this is only because of the power of music. And from the beginning, one of the greatest models to me was Pandit Ravi Shankar, because from my childhood I was deeply inspired by the way he actually reached out. Without sacrificing his classicism, he still reached out to global audiences. And that's also because of his own ability to communicate. And those were like very influential age, when I was really thinking about these aspects, the globalization of music and how Hindustani had actually reached out to global audiences a few decades even before Carnatic. And Carnatic had a lot of catching up to do at that time. When I was introspecting about these issues, like in the early 80s, I was really struck by the fact that most of the world, wherever I went to perform, whether it is in Europe or US or some of these other countries, when people thought of Indian classical, they only knew one system, which was Hindustani. They had not heard of Carnatic music before. And it was absolutely imperative that we had to start popularizing Carnatic as one of the two classical systems of music. So first, the very necessity to establish in everybody's consciousness that there are actually two classical systems of music itself was a very, very big, exciting challenge, I would say. And so to that end, I started writing some small books. And some of my European concerts, I actually distributed free books that I wrote, like very small booklets. It was, in fact, the first one was actually called The Introduction to Carnatic Music, with some photos, some basic things about what is Kalpanaswaram, what is improvisation, what's a kriti, what is Varnam, all these kind of things, so that they could appreciate the concept better. So this was like given to audiences completely for free. In fact, I still recall a concert in San Diego, earlier to the one that you mentioned now. I think sometime in the late 80s, I played for this World Music Institute or something in San Diego. I think, was it Bob Brown?
Yeah, Center for World Music.
The Center for World Music. There also my free booklet was distributed at that time to audiences. So it was very important for me to reach out. And second thing, I was also very keen to develop my own abilities to communicate to global audiences. So which means that I had to not merely say in a very pedantic way something about the music, saying that, oh, this is Chitravina, this is this thing, and now we are going to present Sri Muthuswami Dikshita's masterpiece. See, so the way of communicating is also very important in a language that they can understand and relate to. Now, for example, if I were to say Chitravina, I would actually have to compare it with a Hawaiian guitar. I have to start bringing some parallels in which they can relate to the music. And if I were talking about a scale like Keeravani, I have to then bring the parallel of the minor scale. And if I was going to play Simendra Madhyamam, I would say Keeravani or a minor scale with a sharp fourth, with a Pratimadhyamam. So in any which way I was playing the music, I was always trying to make sure that the audiences were with me, so that the aim of this is very important. So that I didn't have to cheapen the music in order to reach them. I didn't have to dilute. I didn't have to play only some what we think as popular pieces so that global audiences could appreciate it better. Actually, I was very struck by the fact that audiences in Europe could appreciate a Nayaki as much as they could appreciate a Kadana Kutuhula, simply because they didn't know that Kadana Kutuhula was more popular in India. To them, both were good ragas. So the very fact that there were no preformed conclusions in the minds of the listeners, and they came with an open mind. In fact, a lot of them didn't even know as I said, most of them, even when I perform now, a lot of the global audiences have always come and told me, wow, we never heard Indian classical music this exciting. Because until then, they had heard more of the Hindustani, where the beginning of the concert is rather sedate and tranquil, and then it gradually builds up. Whereas in Carnatic concert, moment you start a concert with the concert is, the tempo is set right from the beginning. Or it could be see that this kind of the moment the concert you start, accompanist, percussion is joined, the violinist is already playing, everything is happening at the same time in Carnatic. It's a very dynamic system. And that dynamic aspect of Carnatic was deeply appreciated by global audiences. In fact, I will share some insights, some interesting anecdotes in some of these different countries, the way they respond to the music. It's all very, very beautiful for us to listen to. But the bottom line is that music has the power. It's not the power of so much of the artist. The artist is only like somebody who is merely tuning into this power and then disseminating this power in a very controlled manner. It's just like how we tap electricity in various ways and give it as a fan or as a light or as an air conditioner and all that. So it's just, artist is no more than that. And realizing this brings in a lot of humility to this whole initiative and the mission. And as you said, I was trained by some of the steepest classical musicians. My father, Chitravina Narasimhan sir, is like the most complete musician I've known. And I'm saying this not because he's my father, but very objectively. So Trista, Shatkalam, compositions, improvisation, any musical form, anything, he would be able to sing with such aplomb. Or Naravel Abdina or Pattivithama, he will be able to sing. Kalpana Surams, he'll be able to sing in 10 different ways. And so that kind of musicianship I was exposed to literally from the day I was born. So that was the biggest privilege that I had. And when people talk about Gurukula system, the kind of real Gurukula I was able to enjoy, because 24 hours I was with my Guru. And 24 hours, like, even if you take away like 7-8 hours, I was not even going to school in those days. So 16 hours, 17 hours, 18 hours were only in music. Today you see some advertisements, eat, drink, sleep, Coca-Cola or some such thing. So in my case, it was actually eat, sleep and drink music only. So it was like completely 24/7, it was music. Now, for example, even something like, say, the spinach is called kire in Tamil, right? So we would not refer to it as kire at all. We would actually call it as kiravani. And so now if you actually look at the clock, I think it will be like probably like 6:53 in Pacific time, right? Or something like that, isn't it? And that we would only say it as Tanarupi and Gamanasrama. So that would be by the Melakartha names. So even looking at a clock, we used to be only talking about it in music. And any person I saw, now for example, if I saw Revatiji, I would only think of some Nanati Bratuku or some Mahadeva Shiva Shambho or some such. So the association would always go to music. It will always lead to music. So, so it was absolutely, and if I saw you, Venkatachalam sir, maybe I would think of Dikshit as Venkatachalapate or something like that. So the association of anything used to lead to music in that age. And I think after that, Brindama, another legend, it would be even so difficult to imagine to set foot into her house. She was that inaccessible. Not because of any ego or anything else. It is just that she did not find it worth her while to share her music with people who could not receive that, who are not tuned in enough to her. So, the kind of, it's like, disciples of Einstein, somebody had to be in that caliber to be disciple of Brindama. And, when she would actually teach, her students would be in the league of Samangudi Srinivasaya or M.S. Subbalakshmi, Ramnath Krishnan, that level of artists. And then later on in music college, usually you will see people like T.R. Subramaniam sir or T.K. Govindarao, S.R. Janakiraman, my father, all these kind of artists. So the level of artists who were taught by her would be very different. And so I was very, very fortunate that somehow she found me reasonable enough to repeat a couple of things that she sang. And it was a relationship for almost 10 years of the closest order, where I was privileged to learn some of the greatest masterpieces. And so my mindset, to me, all the fusion, all the collaborations I do is only like salt and pepper, but the core values of Carnatic is like my oxygen, even now. So my mission in fusion is not to play what they actually play, but make them play what we play. So to that extent, I've always tried to arrange our music for Western orchestras, make them play Indian ragas, make them play Indian masterpieces, right from Arunagirinada's Tirupugal to Tyagaraja, Dikshitar, Oothukad, Venkatakavi and all that. Bring that to the mainstream Western repertoire in some ways. And whether it's classical orchestras or jazz or pop or any of these groups, that has been my mission in the last few years. And by God's grace, with the good wishes of all of you, Mel Harmony has been making some progress.
It's beautifully expressed. Your description of your father and how you, day by day, always related to music, gives us some idea how your younger days were and the kind of enormous work Chitravina Narasimhan did with you. He had a huge burden. To have a son like this, then you have to rise up to that and do exactly what is needed. And he has done this with big pleasure. And this is no wonder we called him Acharya Pitamaha. Is the title that Santiago gave him. Okay. You bring up this idea that the preparation you had to do to set up common speaking terms, languages with other systems. And still, why would you look into other systems? Did Brindama look at other systems, or is it you did it? At what time did you say, this music is so beautiful, but I do need to look at other systems? And how does it come? How did you grow into that?
Very good question. See, Venkatachalam sir, there are two aspects to this. One is that music as an end in itself, where you just practice just for the sake of finding perfection and finding God through perfection. You can't really find it. We are just searching for it, really. You always seek perfection, because I strongly believe that perfection is just a journey and not a destination. So we just only try our level best to keep striving for that. As I think there is some mathematical term which probably is something like asymptotically or something, right?
Yes.
Something like so. So you are always only leaning towards it, but never getting there. So that is a kind of approach that any musician actually has. So on that side, I used to actually go away a lot on retreats, even in my formative years. Only my family would know where I am. I'm talking about, after I was 18 or so. So only my family would know where I am, and I would actually find some beautiful spaces where, luckily, there was no cell phone, email, or WhatsApp and all these things in those days. And not even somebody would be not even able to call me at those times, except my family. We had to actually exchange inland letters in those days in India through the snail mail. So, but the thing is, those kind of retreats would give me the kind of quietude to introspect a lot and to actually get deep into the system. And so to do a lot of practice, thinking, writing, reading, without any kind of agendas. And that, I think, is like, recharging your batteries. And so in those times, I learned some of the finest and deepest truths, not only of music, but also of life. So those kind of things really force one to go deeply inward and look at the beauty of the system, whether it's a Begada Padam or whether it is a masterpiece by Tyagaraja or Uthikad or Dikshitar or any of these composers, you go deep and look at those things. So looking at that by itself is a pursuit that you actually lift yourself to go towards whatever you want to call it, God or omniscience or whatever. But on the other side, music as a means has also fascinated me a lot. Music can be a fantastically strong means to actually unify people, to raise funds for very good causes, and to actually create a lot of harmony between diverse cultures in other various ways, and to also use as a therapeutic study. In fact, I don't know whether some of you may be aware, if you actually Google a term called musopathy, that's a term that I had coined some years back to actually increase the scientific values of what was being practiced as music therapy. I'm very glad to tell you that some of the universities, both in India and countries like Australia, have shown a deep interest in musopathy right now. And so some collaborations are going on in that side also. But, it'll be a few years before I can talk about it. But the point I'm trying to make is music as a means is a very, very powerful tool. And when collaborations started coming my way, I did not seek collaborations at all, by the way. It was actually, credit should really go to Dr. L. Subramaniam, who had invited me for a festival of India in Switzerland. He was the artistic advisor for that festival. And I used to play for his brother, L. Vaidyanathan, and some of the other film composers. When I was about 12 to 15, I used to play in some of the films. So only on request where, they wanted very classical parts. In fact, I still remember playing in a film with Ramani sir and Guru Dore sir, along with Veena Parthasarthi, who is the father of Sriram Parthasarthi. So we used to have some very, very beautiful classical kind of music, which is the only one that I used to go and play in. But then again, that I stopped playing even in that. But then when L. Vaidyanathan and L. Subramaniam sir met and they wanted me to go to Switzerland, and in that tour, one day suddenly L. Subramaniam sir wanted me to play in a pop recording with some American musicians. And that recording was the first of my collaborations, because in that recording we had Vinayakaram sir, Haridwara Mangalam Palanivel, T.H. Subhash Chandran, and L. Subramaniam sir himself, plus some American singers. At that time, I didn't know left, right, center of any system in the world except Carnatic, and a little bit of Hindustani. So playing in this kind of recording was very, very important first step for me. And then a few years later, I started getting opportunities to collaborate with blues singers. In fact, my very first album was with the blues legend, who is called Taj Mahal. He's one of the greatest legends. If you look at Taj Mahal, he's like what you may call as the Madhuri Mani Iyer of blues or something like that. So one of the phenomenal artists. In fact, he would sing somewhat like that. In fact, his singing used to remind me a bit of that, because he would get so deep into the music that he will have tears in his eyes when he was performing. And so I got to record with him an album. It was so soulful. And I didn't know anything about blues. I didn't even know how can a music be the color of blue, actually. Blue is a good color maybe, but I didn't even know that a system like that existed. So I had to read up about that, and there was no Google in those days. So I had to ask a lot of people. And then I got to understand a bit about its history and all that. But Vishwa Mohan Bhatt, Pandit Ji and me played with Taj Mahal in that album. It's called Mumtaz Mahal. And even in that, I actually modeled myself after a Carnatic violinist, because whatever Taj Mahal sang, I used to just repeat. Vishwa Mohan Bhatt Ji was playing a little more like a soloist. But in my case, I wanted to just make sure that I was able to reproduce whatever that vocalist sang from any culture. And that training was very important for me, because Taj Mahal was like astounded, because he had never had any guitarist or anybody follow him like that, like T.N. Krishnan sir or Lal Gudi sir in his concerts before. So that was like a very colorful recording. And then I started getting opportunities to play with Middle Eastern artists. So there are fantastic artists from Iran or Chinese, Brazilian, all these kind of artists. And then, so in other words, I didn't seek these collaborations. The collaborations first sought me. And then I think I strongly believe that if you're like top level in your system, then other systems will come to you rather than you going to them. So my whole mission in life was to be as good as possible in Carnatic, so that all other systems, including Hindustani, would want to play with me or they would want to feature me. So that was my mission. So everything I owe to the power of Carnatic, which is bringing us back to the topic. In other words, the power of Carnatic is the one which actually brought those musicians and those orchestras to talk to me at that age. So it is really not so much my power. And Carnatic is like the most complete melodic system in the world. As I started playing with Brazilians or blues or jazz or all these artists, I started realizing the melodic depth of Carnatic music and the melodic breadth as well. You have improvisation like Raga Alapana, Tanam, Neraval, Kalpanaswaram, Taniyavartanam. So you are covering everything from pure melody to pure rhythm. No system has such well-defined categories of this improvisation. We'll just say, okay, improvise. So they'll play anything like Alapana, you can call it, you won't be able to call it as anything. It will be an indistinctive kind of improvisation in most of the systems. Whereas in our music, everything is so beautifully classified, so beautifully codified. So, and then if you look at compositions, the rich variety of musical forms we have, whether it is Kriti, Varnam, Javali, Tilana, Padam, Tirupuhars, or even practice forms like Geetam, Swarajitis, and Kavadichindu. So many other things. If you look at the kind of stupendous amount of forms that we have, I'm not even covering everything here. So all these with so well-developed rigor that we have for the Kritis, which is like exactly the same as the Western classical system, with the freedom that you can see in jazz or pop or some of the other systems. So that means Carnatic is like the perfect blend of both of these, compositions plus improvisation. So any listener from any part of the world of any age group will be able to be enthralled by the power of Carnatic music. And this I have seen firsthand. And Hindustani music, if you take, has all this, but unfortunately or fortunately, their balance is very different, because for them the composition is only 10 to 20%, whereas improvisation is 80%. If you take Western classical, again the composition is almost 100% with very little improvisation. And the same goes for many of the other systems in the world. But Carnatic is like the perfect balance, 50%, 50%. So this 50-50 balance of Carnatic makes it absolutely unique system, and it's a privilege for every Carnatic musician, even if they are only going to be singing in Mylapore or Mambalam, to still realize this, that this is one of the greatest systems in the world. They are the ambassadors of one of the greatest systems that man has ever devised.
I just wanted to share, after hearing your description, I've always come to you with questions. You always seemed as if you have already thought about the answer before. You have seen the question in your mind. I would provoke you with things like, in Todi, if Chatusuji Rishabham is touched, would you call it a Bhashangaragam? You held me for the next 10 minutes of a very clear description of the Gamaka style of Todi around the Rishabham. I still remember that. I just wanted to say that feeling I get. You not only took music to the Western world, but you also took it to rural areas in Tamil Nadu and in India, right? Could you please describe what you did there?
Again, this is again stemming from my greatest respect to the contributors of Carnatic music from diverse communities. Carnatic music has not been only a product of one community or one caste of people at all, as is being claimed in some quarters. It's actually it owes itself to every community. Now, if you look at, and in fact, even if you go back 2000 years back, Carnatic music actually is neither a completely Aryan system, nor is it a completely Dravidian system. It's actually a combination of the Aryan and Dravidian values. If you look at the phenomenal musicological strides that Tamil culture had taken, if you look at some of the Tamil treatises, you will see that their treatises were as good as the Sanskrit treatises, like Bharatanatyam Shastra. If you actually compare that, I'm sure that people like Santanu Gopalan sir and others who are here will be able to attest to this. They might probably have studied these things more. So the point that I'm trying to make is that Carnatic music was a combination of Vedic and Tamil cultures on one hand. Within the Dravidian world, it really had phenomenal Alvars, Nayanmars, or other saints of the Sangam era. And then gradually in the Pallava, Chola, and other realms, we also had such brilliant artists. And then if you look at the Vijayanagara side in Karnataka, what is known as Karnataka now, if you look at those areas, you had fantastic Purandara Dasa and so many other Dasas tradition was there. And if you look at Kerala, you had phenomenal composers even before Swatithanar. And then if you look at Andhra Pradesh, you don't even have to ask, right from Annamacharya, Bhadrachala Ramadas, whom even Tyagaraja and Uthukadu Venkataka we salute. We had phenomenal composers. And then Carnatic also, within this region, we had composers from different castes, different communities, different backgrounds, phenomenal thinkers, philosophers, poets, musicians. All of them is what contributed to Carnatic music. So in other words, the genius of the system is really something, a product of numerous great people. Endaro Mahanubhavalu is a very, very true term. So all these people are what actually are the architects of Carnatic music. And so I was acutely aware of this. And in my own lifetime, I was exposed to some of the brilliant musicians, whether it's Ariyakudi Ramanjayangar, T.N. Rajarathan Pillai, Algat Manier, Payani Subramanian Pillai. If you look at Veeruswamy Pillai, you look at Jalatarang Ramanaya Chettiar, Dwaram Venkatswamy Naidu, Govindaswamy Nayakar. So many communities, there are fantastic artists who have contributed, whether it's Kanchipuram Naina Pillai. I'm not making this list exhaustive, but just giving an idea of the kind of people who contributed to this listening pleasure and evolution of any musician. And if you look at our audiences, even today we have phenomenal audiences from all the communities who are actually pouring into Carnatic concerts because of the power of the music to unite all of them. And all of this led me to the fact that we had to do something in the education system to give opportunities for talented children from rural areas. Because our education system has completely been neglecting the rural areas in terms of identifying their natural passion and talent. So they are all the force-fed mathematics or science or something in which they may not even be inclined to work in. So I started writing to the Madras Corporation. I went to Madras Corporation School in 1990s, like 1994, I think I first, or maybe 92 or something. I went to the Madras Corporation School, then actually first conducted the experiments at that time. And I interviewed about 800 students, of which about 160 wanted to learn music. And of the 160, here is a significant number. 97 out of the 160 or 93 out of the 160 had Swarajnana. And these are all the corporation school children. And so if you now look at maybe maybe few 100,000 schools like this in India, you just calculate about 160 into a few 100,000, you're talking of millions of children whose potential is there at least. Of the few millions, even if like 1% of them actually become reasonable musicians and maybe 0.1% become superstar musicians, you look at the amount of diversity our music would have. So the sheer numbers itself would be phenomenally brilliant for Carnatic music. And among the lesser musicians of those times, many of them will become fantastic listeners. And so you are actually making the system entirely broad-based. This was my argument to the Chennai Corporation and the government of India and all that from the 1990s. And in 2006, I got the opportunity to do a camp for 31,000 rural children. So I wrote a book called Inayatra Inisai. And then, we had a 2-volume DVD where we had Ubyapuram Shivaraman, Shashank, Haridwar Mangalam, so many of the superstar artists actually participated in this rural project, where we sent these DVDs to hundreds and hundreds of schools across Tamil Nadu, and 31,000 children participated. I personally went to many of these corporation schools and I saw the phenomenal passion and talent of many of these children firsthand. And as an experiment, I had deliberately included Sahana, Yadukula Kambodi, Hindolam, Pantuvarali in that syllabus. And these rural children were able to sing Sahana and Yadukula Kambodi, where we are coming and saying Sahana is very difficult, Yadukula Kambodi is difficult. So in other words, my entire experiment proved that music is not really, even the core Carnatic ragas are not out of reach of very, very good students if they are taught properly. And so I should also say that, next year UNESCO gave us a grant of $50,000 because of this project, the success of this project, because they wanted to continue this rural project. And then that's a big story, another story. So I'll just cut short right now. And I still think, even now, a lot of my students, as you all know, are from diverse communities, and many of them, are from even diverse religions and countries as well. You know that has been my passion. And so I have always found that music is really powerful enough to bridge or create bridges rather than break bridges.
Beautiful, beautifully expressed. So what about your interest in composing music for dance? This is, we saw your Ganesha Vaibhavam, you called it Om Ganesha. I went to San Francisco to hear that. And then under C.V. Sundaram, you did Lakshmi Prabhavam. And those are the first introduction I had of your music for dance. Please talk about your experience there.
So again, the dance itself, I forgot to mention this when I was talking about the contributions of Carnatic music. Dance music has been a very, very strong backbone for the Carnatic system. And in the dance tradition, I have to acknowledge the fact that a lot of the Islamic values were also taken in at that time. See, the South India was a big melting pot of Hindu, Islamic, and so many cultures. In fact, some of the dance forms, you will be surprised to know that there is something called Salam Daru in dance. I don't know if some of you have heard of that. It is called Salam Daru. It will start with that kind of thing. It was a part of the Bharatanatyam, or those days maybe Sadir kind of tradition. And there is something called Jikini Daru. So many dance forms had Islamic origins. And as you know, Muthuswami Dikshitar and others also had phenomenal interest in Western orchestral music and all that. So dance, I was very passionate to compose for dance, but my first credit for that in a major way should go to Sri V.V. Sundaram sir, who is here with us this morning. It was he who wanted me to compose Lakshmi Prabhavam first, along with Tanjavur Shankarayar. For reasons of health, Shankarayar could not do that, so I was requested to compose the entire piece. And just about 2 years before that, I had seen Sri Lalgudi's Jaya Jaya Devi, which had been premiered in Cleveland. It was a big inspiration to me. The manner in which he had actually created music for this dance, in such original fashion, along with the lyrics also. So it was a big inspiration, and so I was in that phase of life where I was able to try to dig into that inspiration to compose. In fact, if you sit still, I think some videos of that Lakshmi Prabhavam is still around there, and then Vinayak Vaibhavam, so many of these dance videos are there. If you actually go to my YouTube channel, if you look at some of Ravikiran music for dance or something, even now some of my Pushpanjalis and others, I've been very fortunate to work with artists like Pandit Birju Maharaj or Vaijayanti Malabali, Dr. Leela Samson, and so many others. It has been always a pleasure to work with those artists, and many brilliant schools in the US, whether it is an art school in Chicago or or Canada. So many schools in the US I've been able to work with also. So it's always a pleasure to know. And Professor C.V. Chandrasekhar, so many artists, I can't name all of them, but composing for dance has really enriched me as a musician, because you really have to think differently, and you have to also see how that form is going to be interpreting your music. But again, here I have always sharply differed from many of the other dance composers, to the extent that I've always advocated that dancers have to dance to the music that is given, rather than look at it like made to order pizza. you know. So I have always had some discussions with a lot of my esteemed dancers, because for me, the model was somebody like Bala Saraswati. Because I used to hear a lot of dance music of the previous era. I was strongly of the impression that if a Bhava, Abhinaya queen like Bala Saraswati can dance to a particular tempo, why can't we dance to a good tempo? Why should the tempo be extremely slowed down for everything in the name of Abhinaya or Bhava? So I have had my own opinions of that, and tended to push the dancers a little against their comfort zones on some occasions. So it's a very interesting thing.
So viewing some of the dances for which your music was done in Lakshmi Prabhavam, there is I may very briefly give an example of this Palkadal in which the mattu gets stuck. And the mattu is really a small lady going left and right. That is how it goes. And the music goes with that. And when the mattu gets stuck, the shruti of the music lowers. And I've shown it to people, and it's amazing. It is still very aesthetically pleasing to see how that shruti went down. Those who have watched it in Cleveland will remember this extremely well. So would you like to show us some clips of the dances now?
Dance, I don't know whether I have it here on my laptop. I'll just quickly take a look. But I can possibly share some of the Melharmony clips, since we are talking about Melharmony with Western orchestras. I can possibly start off with something like that if you want. Then maybe I'll look for the dance clip in the meantime.
If you are going to show a Melharmony, then maybe you, in simple way, you can describe how you approach. How is
why don't you let the music first speak a little bit, and then I'll speak about it.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, yeah.
Wonderful.
Just with your permission, I'll go to this. I don't know how to do this. Let me. This is actually a Melharmony concert that.
Of Indian music, and this morning he's in our studio.
Can you actually see this?
Is in Madison for a 2-day festival. So you're going to be in Middleton today. Have you ever visited this area of Wisconsin?
Chamber Orchestra, and it's always a pleasure to be here.
We have the opportunity to collaborate with an extraordinary musician by the name of Chitravina Ravikiran.
I have created this system of music, Melharmony, which actually blends both Eastern and Western values.
The word Melharmony is a conjugation of melody with harmony. And what it does is it aims to bring together the melodic Indian classical music tradition with the harmonic Western classical music tradition.
We explore new chords and counterpoints based on the Eastern roots, so they hear the Eastern music in their language. Well, actually, see, the concert on the square had almost like 45,000-50,000 people. So they were really very curious at first, and then they seemed to like the instrument a lot.
Ravikiran, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear this. We are so lucky to be exposed to music like this.
I didn't want to play the full thing because I didn't want to make it too long for you, but the song continues. As I'm sure that, can you all hear me?
Yes.
So I'm sure that all of the Carnatic music lovers and musicians would have recognized this to be a composition of Muthuswami Dikshitar, Parvati Patim, and so that is in Hamsadhvani. So I had created the entire notation for this, and also I had also given the entire for Western classical orchestras, every single note, every single articulation, every single dynamics, whether it has to be loud or it has to be soft, and to what degree it has to be loud, and what's the tempo it has to be, whether the notes have to be connected. All these need to be given very, very precisely, as opposed to our system where we intuitively play a lot of things. So working on this kind of notation itself was very educative. And this is like, I've been this festival, as you all noticed, probably 45,000-50,000 people for the first ever time they heard of somebody called Muthuswami Dikshitar. They heard of somebody called Carnatic music. There's something called Carnatic music. They heard something called Chitravina. All these things were like first in their memory and their lives. And it was also projected as a Dikshitar Beethoven festival. So we had compositions of Muthuswami Dikshitar, we had a repertoire of Beethoven, and then we had, I think one piece was Mozart in that entire concert on the square. So I'm just going to, sorry, Revati.
No, sorry, Sri Ravikiran, there was one very relevant question here. I just wanted to, from the audience, this is from Renuka. She says, Ravikiran sir, when you introduced our great composers to Western bands, how did they react and what questions did they come up with? I thought that would be a good question to answer.
Yeah, I think, when I first worked with, my first Melharmonic exploration was with the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra in UK. So the BBC, when I first proposed this term Melharmony to them, I really thought that they'll be very resistant, because I know that Europeans have a different world view, actually, so to speak. They have a very extremely Eurocentric view to music. As far as they are concerned, classical means only European classical. All the other systems, in fact, this was a very, very sore point with me, because other systems like Carnatic or Hindustani or Chinese or anything used to be written off as tribal systems in some of the European textbooks in those days. So, it was a crusade for us to start establishing in their consciousness that this is classical. Now, if you actually heard this conductor speak in this, I'll actually play a little more clip of what he spoke in this. You will start seeing how he acknowledged that Indian classical is older than European classical music now. I will actually play that clip for you before I proceed with Renukaji's question. Just give me 1 second. I'm not very, very great at this, so just give me 1 second. I have to do this. Here.
Concerts on the square at the zoo. Come and show up on some beautiful nights. It'll be a string orchestra, and we look forward to doing that. This will be one of the pieces on that. We have the opportunity to collaborate with an extraordinary musician by the name of Chitravina Ravikiran from Madras, or formerly Madras, Chennai, India. And we were contacted by what was known as the Melharmony Foundation. Now, the word Melharmony is a conjugation of melody with harmony. And what it does is it aims to bring together the melodic Indian classical music tradition with the harmonic Western classical music tradition. Now, the Western classical music tradition goes back to the 15th century Renaissance and maybe the 11th and 12th centuries, when there were monasteries and monks at that time singing Palestrina and plain song. Well, the Indian classical music history goes way beyond that, to 2500 BC. And there are songs that were set to Sanskrit.
So now I'm back on air, right?
You're back.
So you could hear what this conductor, how the conductor was introducing our classical music tradition to the West. And so now they are appreciating the fact that Indian classical music is way more traditional and classical than any other classical system in the world. So this is what I have been trying to sort of establish in the minds of the world music listeners as well as the musicians themselves. So I think this was one part of it. So when I worked with BBC Philharmonic, for instance, they were very pleasantly open-minded about doing this. In fact, I arranged Tyagaraja's Shobilu Saptaswara in that concert. I still remember that. I don't have the clip here. But this was not the full orchestra of the BBC. It was only a hand-picked orchestra. So we just had some musicians from that BBC who played in that. Subhash Chandran sir played in that Ghatam and Konakol. There was a tabla artist as well. So those concerts were very well received by God's grace. And then, they were selected out of the top 5 out of 2,000 concerts all over the world in that year. And the BBC magazine again ran a cover story called BBC Melharmonic, because I introduced this in a very colorful way to the audiences that all these years you have been listening to BBC Philharmonic. Today you're going to hear BBC Melharmonic. And so the cover story of the BBC magazine actually carried that in that thing. So once the musicians were given notations, which I started developing that thanks to a phenomenal Western composer and music theorist called Professor Robert Morris. Robert Morris is one of the greatest legends in the Western world, both as a composer. He's from the Eastman School of Music. He really developed Melharmony from the Western standpoint. So a lot of Melharmony rules are today very solid in the sense of the theory for even Western composers to be able to apply. So Robert Morris did a lot to develop this. And so then, I learned the notation system, and then everything that I give to them as notes, they're able to just read and play now. They can just keep the notes, sight read and play this song. I'm just going to show, with your permission, I'll show a small clip of some students playing a composition of Purandaradasa. And you can see in the thing how they have the notes in front of them. This is actually a concert where 2,200 students in Minneapolis from different schools combined together as one orchestra to play as a few pieces of Purandaradasa, Tyagaraja and all that. So this is, I'm not going to say what piece it is. I think you'll be able to easily guess this. Many of the students will be able to guess this. Probably the name of the piece may be there in the file. So I'm sure that all of you recognize this as Purandara Geetam Padmanabha. So it's a privilege that, I'm able to introduce the Purandara Geetam or Arunagirinatha Tirupuhar or anything, even to Western schools. So I wish that we are able to do this with the same ease with schools in India also. So, that is another subject altogether, and I'll discuss that a bit later. But addressing Renuka's question back to that, it's basically that the way in which Western musicians react to music is that they read the music, Western classical artists. Whereas for jazz artists, my strategy is very different. I can even record on WhatsApp a line and, I can tell them to perfect that line and then we can all improvise on those lines. I can just give them broad guidelines on what to do. But even for jazz musicians, I actually write down the music, at least some structure, and give it to them. So the writing part is what is a challenge, because if I have to write a 2-minute piece like Padmanabha, if I have to arrange it well for a Western orchestra, then in fact, if you notice in this orchestra, it is only the strings. There is no other instruments. So even within strings, I have to arrange parts for violin, first violin, second violin, viola, cello, and double bass. So it has to be different parts given to them at different times. So all that arrangement takes a lot of time. And by God's grace, it has been a very enriching experience for me. And all credit should go to Muthuswami Dikshitar. Probably, in fact, I've always gone around telling Western audiences that probably the first ever composer who attempted East-West fusion was Muthuswami Dikshitar, because he was the one who started creating some Sanskrit lyrics for Western tunes. So it was really nice to take Muthuswami Dikshitar to the West, because he had actually brought a bit of the West to the East, even a few hundred years back. So similarly, we have done festivals of Tyagaraja, Mozart, Uthikadu Venkatakavi, Bach, and all these brilliant composers.
So
I think there are some questions also, right?
Yeah. In this context, have you considered doing Manodharmam with them?
Have we considered doing Manodharmam with jazz artists? Yes.
Yes, jazz artists.
With jazz artists, yes. For Western classical artists, what I have done is I have written the Manodharma parts for them also.
Okay.
So now, for example, if I want a feel of a Kalpana Swaram in a concert, I will write the Kalpana Swarams for now. One turn will be some violin, and another turn will be a trumpet, another turn will be myself playing, another turn could be, a trombone playing. So I actually create the parts for them, and we have the cues. In fact, I can share some of that. If you have time, I can share one of those examples also with you. Where a fantastic orchestra, the Apollo Chamber Orchestra in Houston, played Arunagirinatha's Tirupuhar. So you can imagine basically Arunagirinatha in Houston. So, I'll see if we have time, I'll probably share that also, a little bit of that clip. Because
there's a question from Ashwi, and it says that he's learning Carnatic music. Would like to know if learning Hindustani music would make me a better Carnatic musician.
Actually, in my opinion, I strongly believe that you should really, really specialize in one thing for at least 8 to 10 years. Then you can start listening to other things. You can listen to the other thing, but along with a guru, so that the guru will really filter out what you should not take from something. For example, I can honestly say that my father used to make me listen to All India Radio national programs, which used to start at 9:30 in the night and go until 11 in the night, when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And All India Radio had this policy of equal representation of the country. So 3 weeks it would be Hindustani, because North India, West India, and East India would be Hindustani artists. So 1 week would be Carnatic. It used to be on Saturdays. And I was really exposed to some of the finest Hindustani artists even in that era. But my full grounding was only Carnatic. And I think for any student today, you should first recognize the fact that the voice techniques, the musical techniques for Carnatic and Hindustani are very, very different. The voice requirements are different. If you actually start learning Hindustani, you will go with a different orientation. When you sing that, you need a different kind of voice training. When you are doing that, you are more looking at the glide, what they call as the mean. Whereas in Carnatic, this oscillation you will not see in Hindustani, because this is a very different typical Carnatic oscillation. If you look at Todi Gandhara, so even if you look at a common raga, say like Kiravani, Pandit Ravi Shankar ji took it from Carnatic, but gave it a Hindustani flavor because of the way he would handle the gamakas. It's like English being spoken with an Indian accent, or with an American accent, or with a British accent. So the same notes are given different accents and different ornamentation by different systems. And if you actually go to that Hindustani thinking that you will learn Carnatic better, your orientation will change. Even some of the finest exponents have not been able to manage the dichotomy between the two systems when they want to specialize in two systems. It's very challenging. And I would recommend that you go to the best Carnatic exponent and learn from that artist, and then specialize. Listen to other things, and then you will be invited to perform with the Hindustani artist yourself. And then you can explore some common ragas, do a lot of then you can actually see how these ragas are treated in Hindustani. You can appreciate the differences if you are really first sure of your system. Otherwise, it will just be any kind of fusion should not become either a diffusion or a confusion. So it needs absolute clarity of thought. And each system is beautiful. Same thing with opera. Now, when I first used to listen to opera, I didn't even know whether they were actually singing happy music or sad music, because I didn't understand anything that was happening. I didn't understand what technique was being used for what emotion in opera. So, if they sang that something like that, they would sing with such clarity that it can even break a mirror actually. But I didn't even understand the rasa of the music at that time. But that is not a technique that we use in Carnatic. Whereas I have been very lucky that some of the North Indians have been learning Carnatic from me. But they again, I teach them the same Mukhari or Begada or anything with the same Carnatic gamakas. And I encourage them to sing with the correct accent and oscillations and the details. So that when they want to specialize in Carnatic, they come and learn Carnatic. I thought I saw a question from M.A. Krishnaswamy sir also. I don't know where it is.
That's right. Let me find that for you. He wants to ask the question, how non-concert artists but can have good knowledge in music to be recognized? Let me read exactly. Namaskarams. I want to ask how the non-concert artist but have good knowledge in music to be recognized. So what are you saying?
Well, I think I understand the spirit of the question. So I think non-concert artists, if they start, I think this is also true for concert artists, in my opinion, strongly, because I have always insisted upon the fact that it's a multi-step process. The first and foremost requirement, whether you want to be a tansen or a kansen, whether you want to be a musician or a rasika, is train the ears first. You're listening, the maximum amount of listening to highest quality of artists. Do not listen to everything. If we listen to everything, then we will not even know how to discern between poor music or substandard music or mediocre music. We will have no perspective of which is a real gold jewelry or which is the artificial gold. So we have to listen to the highest music under a quality guru who will actually tell you what to listen for your type of voice or your type of talent. And so then develop the ears, and then in the class, of course, students have to listen to the guru singing or playing to develop their musical knowledge. But as listeners, I think the more they listen to very good musicians and also talk to good rasikas and interact with good musicians, they can ask their doubts to a musician who will be open to help them increase their rasikatva. I think that will be a very good idea. And for students, I have always said, develop your ears, and your ears will develop your mind, and your mind will develop your voice or your hands. So it's a very important step process that we have to take. And for students especially, do not try to learn music through your eyes. You're not supposed to be just learning through the notation. Look at the guru singing. As far as possible, use ears, unless you are a Western classical artist where you need the notation for other purposes.
Okay. So there is
I've answered this correctly to Krishnami sir. He can always ask if there is a follow-up question.
There is a question from Nivi Sai Shankar. When you compose kritis, varnams, tilanas, do you start with the tune and then lyrics, or vice versa? How do you do that?
It's a very difficult question to answer because inspiration can be so many types. Sometimes it could be just a beautiful word that may, or a phrase that may, strike our mind. It could be something that you are actually seeing in day-to-day life. In fact, I will give a very, very funny example. 2 examples I'll give. One was I was actually climbing off an aircraft from a flight in Portland or someplace, I don't even remember where. And we were all in the aircraft, just getting out of the aircraft. And just about 5-6 paces ahead of me, a very small infant baby, maybe a few months old. It just made some, it just getting off the aircraft, something it did. One small wail is what that baby actually did. But somehow that wail formed into a composition in my mind. That Chakshuti Rishabham, that wail itself suggested the Chakshuti Rishabham with that kind of oscillation, and that song itself formed because of that little baby's wail for a couple of seconds. So, so it could be as simple as that. On another occasion, I was actually visiting the Chamundishwari temple in Mysore, with a bunch of friends. And at the end of that, we had a fantastic, we were allowed to go very close to the deity, thanks to some well-wishers. And then after that, the friend came out to the temple and told me, sir, we could all see the goddess so beautifully. It was so nice. I said, there's no point if we see the goddess beautifully. The goddess has to see us beautifully. Only then there is any purpose to life. If I were to come and say that I know a prime minister very well or a president very well, it means nothing. Unless that person knows me very well, it's completely no use to me. So that's why I was just telling this friend. But then the thought process took me to a completely wacky direction. And so I started thinking, what happens if God is not able to see us very well because of some visual handicap that the God himself may have? So I did this composition, imagining Shanmukha with 6 faces,
12,
with some visual handicap. So I said this composition is whether you want glasses, velava. Yan kureigal kana pannire nayanangalukum. So imagine a glasses with 12 eyes, with a frame that actually fits his 12 eyes. So it's actually a very comical scene. It's like a Nindastuti. It's like a spoof actually. But the thought process originated from a very divine ambience. So this Carnatic Vendumo Velava is actually there on YouTube, a version of that. In fact, I think it was from one of my live vocal concerts. So inspiration can really come from so many sources. Many times, let me also say one more thing. Pandit Jasaraj once sang this beautiful bhajan called Niranjani Narayani in Sindhu Bhairavi. This was in Seattle in 1988. The first day was Bishmillah Khanji, second day Pandit Jasaraj, third day was my concert, Ragmala. And this is, I happened to attend those concerts, and he sang this Niranjani so beautifully. And I wanted to learn it for a long time. But somehow, because of our schedules, we just couldn't learn it at all. I couldn't go and learn it from him or even find a recording of it. So then I ended up composing a song, my own bhajan called Niranjani Narayani in Sindhu Bhairavi with the same opening, The opening tune, the opening words of the first two will be the same as that Jasrajji's rendition. But rest of it will be my lyrics and my tune, of course. So, the thing will branch off in a very different way. But that inspiration came from that. So there could be so many ways in which people are inspired. And sometimes I have actually been inspired by people like Sundaram sir or others who have actually asked me to compose for dance. So then it's a completely different setting. And at other times, my students could come and, I actually composed a Tilana for a student who didn't know what Tilana is. So I actually composed a Tilana for her just to make it very easy for her to understand the form. So there are so many types of inspiration that happen sometimes.
I just wanted to add that such questions come because once we hear one of your compositions, he said, how does he do it? That is the sense in which I still remember your Anila Kumaram, which opens Begada with Pasa. That's it. Anila Kumaram Sapasa. Somehow that Sapasa still represents Begada for me.
It's actually, see again, now that is brilliant inspiration from Shama Shastri and later on Puchi Srinivasa Iyengar. The Sapasa you will never see as an opening in Carnatic music generally, except these two compositions. Fantastic opening for Anand Bhairavi by Shama Shastri.
Yeah.
And then Shri Raghukule Nidhin by Puchi Srinivasa Iyengar and Hussaini. So this Begada song was composed because Akkari Shubhalakshmi, my accompanist, was a big Anjaneya devotee, and she was asking me, "Ninga edho Anjaneya Swami mela panni enakku kodukonu." In fact, I think she sang it in your organization, right? I composed it sometime just before that on her request. And then Begada is such an overpopulated raga that any opening you can think of, some other great composer would have already used it. So, so this somehow struck me. So Anamari Sangatis, formed themselves by God's grace, honestly speaking.
Beautiful, yeah. I think Neyveli Santanagopalan sir had to leave, so but we know what he wanted to remark. So Revati, could you?
Sure. This is from Sri Neyveli Santanagopalan sir. I can go on for hours talking about Sri Ravikiran's scholarship, erudition, and contribution. But today I'm going to confine myself with this statement. He is a perennial source of inspiration and joy for all musicians and vidyarthis like us. He is perhaps the only complete musician in every sense in this generation. Long live his service, and let us all support his mission in every possible way. Thank you, Indian Fine Arts Academy San Diego team and Dr. Venkatachalam sir for bringing out the best from Ravikiran ji today.
Wonderful.
It's a privilege to have this kind of words from a fantastic artist like Sri Santanagopalan sir. My warmest thanks to him as always.
Is V.V. Sundaram sir on?
Yeah, he's right.
Yeah. I invite you to make some comments, please.
I think you're on mute, Sundaram sir.
Let me say we are so happy you are here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
we're so happy you are safe and here. You gave us a scare.
Thank you very much.
I have to say, I never knew that a virus could come in human form.
Yes, unfortunately true. Unfortunately. I want to start with a small anecdote and then I will ask a question actually. And there was this young MP who was in his early 20s who walked into the British Parliament building. And before entering, he looked at it and he was overwhelmed by the thought that This is where Gladstone and Disraeli and others have debated. Me as a young man, what am I going to say? How am I going to talk? So he turned to this old wizened gatekeeper over there and expressed these thoughts. He said that, I feel very stupid. I don't know what to say. And he said that, sir, I would advise you to keep quiet and dispel any doubt others may have about the same thing. So I think that along those lines, after your introduction and Ravikiranji's talk, what am I going to say? So I'm going to rush in where angels fear to tread and remark about a particular incident that I had with you. When Ravikiranji was 7 years old, I think, one of the conversation later on he told me was that when he was 7 years old, he saw one of the Varnams. I think it was Natakuranji. And he looked at it and he said that, why don't I compose something along the lines? And he composed, and he was 7 or 8 years old at that time. That's one incident. Then down the road for the Cleveland Mahabharatam, which was also done in San Diego at that time, we went to Briju Maharaji and we wanted both of them to collaborate, Ravikiranji and Briju Maharaji, for the Yuddha Kandam, that side of it. And we were there, myself and my wife, talking to both of them. And Pandit Briju Maharaji said that normally I work only with my compositions. You're asking me to work with somebody else. And not only that, I work with my own students, but you are going to give me North America-based young dancers to work with them. How is it going to be possible, kind of a thing? It's a long story, but in the end, Ravikiranji was sitting there in a small flat in the living room. Panditji came with his harmonium and tabla, and they collaborated and brought this the fighting scene in Mahabharatam towards the end. My question to Ravikiranji is that there is a difference of about 30-40 years between the time you composed the first one and then sitting down with Maharaji and composing and having an interaction. I saw the interaction. You will come up with something and you'll say, no, I wanted to change the nadai. Can you please do it? My question to you is that, Ravikiranji, that experience, what is it that inspired you at that time? Is it a combination, I know, of your own Vidvat and the Vidvat you saw in him? But what was your feeling at that time, sitting down and composing collaboratively, seeding your sense of, may I use the word ego, for example, and accepting somebody else's? How did you come up with that phenomenal piece of music? That's what I want to hear from you.
First of all, thank you for the very flattering words, Sundaram sir. As always, my honor. So first, to very briefly answer what inspired me, a very, very simple one-word answer would be you, because you are the one who was the sutradhara for this whole thing. So I think, but on the other hand, you know, I had first seen Briju Maharaji's concert in Music Academy with Zakir Hussain ji on the tabla when I was a teenager. It was like phenomenal. I was in the front row and it was absolutely stunning for me to see the footwork matching with the tabla or the tabla matching with the footwork. One could not see which was matching with what. That amount of precision and phenomenal artistry they both displayed at that time. And I have always been a fan of Briju Maharaji. And when you suggested that I should compose something with him, it was like absolutely an honor for me. And I remember we both went to Delhi for this meeting. And it was so beautiful to work with Panditji. And it was also nice that he is a fantastic musician himself. See, many of the dancers, I really love to work with dancers who are excellent musicians, whether it is Dr. Vaijayanti Malabali or Briju Maharaji or Professor C.V. Chandrasekhar. They're all fantastic artists. I would also prefer Lakshmana, with whom I have worked. Again, a very good musician. So all these artists are able to understand the musical nuances better than dancers who are only specialists in dance. And so, your communication is far nicer with those kind of artists because they will understand the nuances of music and they will also be able to think the music beautifully. And Briju Maharaji was no exception to that. If you recall, in the very Cleveland festival that we had that year, Birju Maharajji played tabla to my Chitravina concert.
Yes, yes, correct.
Right? So he's a fantastic artist. He's a master of rhythm, and he is also a fantastic melody artist. So these kind of complete artists bring out the best, and I was able to, be inspired enough to compose at that time. And the same thing as when I work with fantastic dance schools in the US or Canada and all that. Sometimes we have very good interactions with artists like, say, Hema Rajagopal or some of the other wonderful dancers who are in the US also. Excellent to work with dancers because it also widens my own horizons.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful question.
And I should actually also add here that that collaboration inspired me to compose this Natya Malika Tilana, which was like the finale of this Mahabharata, where the Pallavi would be in Shuddha Saveri set to Bharatanatyam style, and the Anupallavi would be in Behag, which is set to Kathak style. And then we had the Charanam, which is set to Kuchipudi style, which was in Anand Bhairavi. And there is a finale where all the three styles will combine before it comes back to the Pallavi. So, in fact, that Natya Malika Tilana was again an inspiration because of these phenomenal artists that you brought to Cleveland and San Diego, all of you, Indian Fine Arts, as well as the Cleveland Festival. So that inspired me to compose. I mean, so in other words, it really allowed me to think out of the box and compose a Natya Malika Tilana, probably a very different kind of piece. And I think that Natya Malika is still available in one of my YouTube channels.
Thank you.
I have a message from Srimati Nirmala Chandra Rajashekar, a wonderful Veena artist, that I would like to read out. I think she had to leave as well. She says, "Thank you for a most illuminating evening, Shri Ravikiran ji and Indian Fine Arts. Such an inspiring talk from a master artist. So glad to have been able to be here today. Beautifully moderated by Venkatachalam Mama."
No, Revati ji also, she says. Left out that. I won't allow you to do that. Okay. May I ask our President, Nathan, to come and make some comments now? Shekhar ji.
Yeah, thank you very much. What a wonderful lecture demonstration on the musicianship, the music, and most importantly, how he was able to bring the music to the West and take the music from the West to the East, and an all-round musician with over 800 plus compositions during a very short period. As you may recall, Dr. Venkatachalam, Revati, that in 2012, we had Ravikiran ji perform in front of none other than Bharatratna Ravi Shankar in his home. And I still remember at the end of the event, Ravi Shankar ji basically said, the one Ravi is settling down in the West at the moment, the other one is rising at the moment in the East. Indeed, actually, that this was one of our best moments in terms of basically that displaying his music to another fantastic musician. And I think this is a perfect fitting tribute in that regard for having that event we have had at that moment. And we have had approximately in the 12 festivals, he has played 10 festivals. Every year, yes, Ravikiran ji has played in our festival. And sometimes he has played with people like, for example, Dr. Balamurali Krishna and Dr. Ramani Sar, and also others as well. And what a fantastic musician he is. And again, this talk can go on for hours. Once again, I want to thank all the participants for attending this event. And most importantly, Indian Fine Arts Board for making this event possible. Thank you, and looking forward, and let me give it back to Revati ji to conclude.
Yes, again, thank you all so much. I would like to request all of you to spread the word. Our goal here is to have these extremely illuminating conversations, like what we had today. I learned so much today, and Ravikiran ji is such an inspiring musician, just mind-boggling, right? What he has done in his, 50 plus short years of life. It's just unbelievable. So we're going to have many more such conversations. Please spread the word. We truly want to make this kind of a universal connect. We're talking about the universal nature of Carnatic music. We really want to take Indian fine arts way beyond San Diego. And so please tell your friends to attend. The next session, I think, will be in a couple of weeks. Sri Shekhar will be announcing. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And thank you, Ravikiran ji. That was just wonderful. That was.
Thank you very much, Revati ji.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venkatachalam sir, Shekhar ji, and Revati ji. And thank you all for the listeners and other great artists who are also here attending this session, and the Rasikas. Thank you all very much. It's always a pleasure. And my only request is all of you try and stay safe and stay healthy in these COVID times. And let's try to fight this virus unitedly, using the power of music for mankind as a species. Thank you all very much. Namaste again. I'm sorry that I have not been able to cover some of the questions that have been asked, but due to paucity of time, I'm sure the moderators are on top of it. So we'll hopefully be in some other sessions in the near future.
I just wanted to add that all your answers were so complete for our questions, but it leaves us with a desire to ask you more. So கேட்கணும் உங்களை பத்தி அப்படின்னு ஒரு ஃபீலிங்கோட வருது. அது எல்லாருக்கும் வந்திருக்குனாக்கா then this lectum is very, very successful. If all of us feel that we should ask him more questions. It is as if he has answered. He has ably answered the specific question we asked. In fact, he has elaborated them. But then that raises other questions that we may want to ask him. So there will be another opportunity for it.
I'm pretty sure.
That's a wonderful way to end the event. Again, thank you, Ravikiran ji, for the intellectually stimulating and informative lectum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaskaram.